All right. Good evening again. This is Hurricane Age. You are watching the iHealth channel and listening in on iHealth Radio. This is another talk show series, and this is the name of this series will be Regulate and Legislate. And I did mention this in previous sessions or talk shows. And what this particular series will cover is anything that has to do with regulations in the healthcare and health-related industries, as well as legislation that may impact, the different, aspects of our healthcare. And but obviously, I'm going to start with the stuff that's close to the previous topics and things that I, pretty much have worked with directly, and namely Medicare Marketing Guidelines, and that will be the first topic we're going to start with this particular series, and then we'll move on from there by getting additional topics and discussing different other guidances and regulations that may impact the healthcare, whether it's in pharma, although we have a pharma series separately, or within the actual provider networks and things like that. But today, because we talked about brokers, we talked about senior health and the Medicare, we talked about MCO world. This is a very straight line actually, and covering the regulations that impact those particular aspects that we've covered. And specifically today, we'll talk about the marketing guidelines. And of course, this is not just for professionals or brokers that are out there, but it's also for consumers and anyone that is potentially dealing with the brokers in the community. So if you're a consumer, a senior, a social services advocate person, this could be for you as well. And if you're a trainer, this could be for you, but the idea is we're going to share with you today, I'm going to share with you today, some of the basic elements of, the marketing guidelines, a little bit of historic, and then, the do's and don'ts, where people usually kind of tend to make, mistakes, and or how to avoid those mistakes, and how to do the job correctly out there in presenting Medicare products and benefits. And for consumers, this will be a great opportunity to know, things that you should look for and look out for. If you see it, that doesn't make sense. And if once you hear this, you will know more or less what I'm talking about. If you see a behavior, something that is not appropriate, then you will be able to identify that and move away and not really interact with that particular agent, or at least you may flag that there's something wrong. So it's a win-win for both. So for you professionals, this will give you a little bit of guidance if you're new into the business, or you're in entertaining get into the business, based on some of the guidance that I've started with previous sessions in terms of how to become a broker. Whether you're in it or you're coming into it, whether you're a consumer, this might be something that will be beneficial and informational. So I want to start with first, a little bit of a historic. So I did mention in the world of MCO, that MCO world, how it all started, the world of managed care, and things were, kind of put in place. But it took a little time for the whole concept to get where it is today. Obviously, it took time. But in that time, there were a lot of trials, a lot of, mistakes, a lot of, non-compliant activities that may have occurred in the beginning of the days, because there were no real strict regulations in the onset of all this. So when Medicare Managed Care started, it was kind of free for all. So agents, first of all, they were not licensed, and you could literally sell Medicare at the time and present Medicare products with no license. So we did cover, the licensing piece in the broker world, but just to highlight it for anyone that missed that session. Anyone that is actually a producer for insurance, needs to be licensed through their regular state. So if you're in a particular state, you need to go to a pre-licensing course, you get a state examination, you get a license, and you renew that license every 2 years. And that makes you pretty much kind of within the norms and the compliant piece of the insurance producer. And then after that, there's other certifications that may take place, plus every health plan, every carrier, insurance carrier will have their own regulations, procedures, policies and procedures and regulations that you might have to comply with. So that's just the first part. But like I said, in the initial days of Medicare Managed Care, there were no license requirements. So people would just basically become, agents or representative companies They have a package that they would offer, in the communities that they serve, and then ultimately they would just do whatever it takes to get the sale. So it was, cold calling was a go. Walk into anywhere. You can walk in anywhere and knock on doors and do all that stuff. A lot of these activities were in place. Which today we look, and we frown upon, but back in the days, they were just the norm. Like in many other sales types, there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, you knock on doors, someone opens the door, you tell them about, services. You can go to, a street and talk to anyone, approach everybody, give flyers under the door. Those things and practices that were available back in the days. And of course, there were a lot of misrepresentations, misleading presentations, and people did get hurt in the process because they kind of were not given the truth. They were misled into some stuff. They were told things that were not true. For example, I'll tell you, well, your doctor isn't a network. Yeah, you can go to every doctor you want. And ultimately, you as a consumer, you think that you sign up for a plan and your doctor is in the plan. And then ultimately you go and the doctor does not take that particular plan. That's a problem, right? So some of these examples, were really flagrant, big, no-nos and big problems that did impact the overall industry in a way, because there were a lot of sanctions and some plans, and the Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services had to readjust and come up with a better guideline to as how everybody would work within these managed care plans, and ultimately to protect both the health plans, the producers, as well as the consumers. So that being said, in the history, around after the Part D, in the 2003 mark, there were still some regulations that were coming through, and then ultimately, in 2007, that's when the updated version of Medicare guidelines got in place, and a lot of things changed at that point. So things, for example, like the unsolicited contact, which basically you cannot just knock on doors. There's no door-to-door soliciting, no cold calling, things like that. That took an effect, and it was not only it took an effect, but it became a very strict rule. And there are guidelines about that, and we'll cover that as well. There was also marketing guidelines in the field and in events. So people used to do presentations. They can do whatever they wanted. I could just meet with someone and sign them up. So there were a few things that were very open and not restricted, not actually guided, and it was just no instructions for it, and people did what they thought was best at the time. So the guidelines came in just to streamline things and kind of guide everyone and set a structure and a foundation so people actually can, deliver properly as health plans. There are also, ramifications if you actually violate any of those policies and or regulations, and those can be very severe in terms of financial, penalties for the health plans. So ultimately, the health plans had to also get through, certain processing. They have to establish policies, and actually they get audited. And if they don't meet certain, the criteria that they have put in place, they can actually have violations, and thus they'll have to get, some sort of a corrective action plan to the Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services, and then ultimately that becomes a little bit of a flag, and then they'll be monitored for a period of time. They have to adhere to that corrective action plan. So it becomes a nuisance to the health plans, and it makes it more difficult for anyone, because everybody that joins that particular health plan or any health plan at that point becomes, very restricted in terms of like what they can do, how they can do and stuff. Now, that being said, it was not meant to stop the business. It was not meant to actually kind of make it more difficult, rather than just to streamline things, as I said, and make sure that the consumers are protected, and also the health plans are protected, and there's no shortcuts here, nobody's cutting corners. So some of the heavy things that we're going to cover today are basically events marketing, the non-solicited or unsolicited contact, like the door-to-door solicitation types, RV marketing or like community marketing, and also just the network types of things that you can and things you can say versus things you cannot say, and ultimately also we'll talk about some healthcare setting marketing guidelines. So those are like the key topics. So any agent out there that is in the Medicare world, these are the things that they have to abide with. These are the things that they have to comply 100%. There is no 70% pass. It's 100% or better. There is nothing less. You cannot actually accept anything less. There's also the certification piece that goes beyond that. that. So everybody has to actually they have to actually go through the process of onboarding and meet certain, minimum requirements. Not only the licensing, I mentioned before, there's other certifications like the AHIP certification, which is an annual thing that most of the health plans in the nation have adopted over the last few years. And that's basically a certification where someone has to go through different modules and courses and then get examined, on each one of those courses. And you have to pass each one of those modules and ultimately do some fraud, waste, and abuse classes. And it's all online. And then at the end, you pass with a score, and there's a minimum score. Also, CMS established a minimum score for testing, for these things, not only for the certification, but also for health plans if they had their own courses, because some plans may opt out of the AHIP certification and have their own program, onboarding program or, marketing guidelines program where they can cover the Medicare basics, the ABCDs, they cover the market regulations and stuff like that, and then also their benefit packages. Now, if a company chose to do their own thing, they can, and they still can now. They would have to just go, and present that whole program, have their own agendas, have their own, sign-in sheets and documentation of everybody that attended. They work with usually learning development or training departments, and HR, and all that stuff gets, pretty much put into a database. So when CMS comes in and maybe they want to validate the information, they want to check everything. And sometimes when an audit is taking place, with the CMS, they might inquire about a particular case or member, and then they do a track back to like who's the agent, were they on board, how was the onboarding, were they through the certification, did they pass the certification, all those little things that actually are set, they are looking to. And therefore, if there is a failure in that particular audit, that becomes a problem for the actual health plan. Now, the problems can be so severe that plans can be shut down. So we don't want that, and the advice is that everyone should do everything compliantly. Now, we are in sales, and I usually talk about the sales component because that's the driver. But really, you don't have to cut corners. You don't have to do anything non-compliant to actually get your sales. And we're going to talk in different series, and I've started already talking about some things, what you can do to make it right and do it in the compliant format. But today we're going to cover those guidelines. So if someone has any difficulty understanding them, or they're not applying them properly, I'm going to give them to you in a way that is actually based on field experience. And so I'm going to tell you how it's done the right way versus not the right way. And so this way, if you're out there, I'm sure all the companies have their trainings, and that's great. This is just a reinforcement, if you want to call it that way, and it's through our channel here. But the idea is, it is a big topic, and there are certain things that you need to do as a plan, as an actual management team, as an individual producer, and also as consumers, to understand what agents can and cannot do. So this way, you cannot fall into any of those traps. Now, I would give the benefit of doubt that 100% of all our producers out there are great and compliant, but sometimes people get tempted. It's sales, pressure, numbers, performance, and people may just take a shot at things and want to feel that they can break a rule and not be caught. So the idea is, it can happen, and we don't want that to happen. So if you're watching this, if you're listening to this particular podcast or broadcast, please make sure that you follow these rules. And they're going to be very simple, and I'll break it down to a way that is very, very basic, field-bound, field-tested, and you'll be fine. So even as a management, if someone is watching right now and they're in the sales leadership in the Medicare helpline, this may help you actually just guide your teams properly. And if you're an agent, this is perfect because you will actually get it from source. And now I'm telling you, I've done it, been there, done that. So and I've trained people to do it the right way. And again, I'm going live, so everything I'm going to say, I'm very comfortable saying. And the idea is, first of all, let's talk about licensing and training and stuff. First thing, once you go through the certification, you have to get your benefit test and your certification. You have to pass. Most of the plans, they require an 85% and up to pass. No less, because that's kind of like what the requirement for CMS is, and they want to make sure that you're actually up there, that you're not less than compliant or less than prepared to be out there, and you understand your stuff. If you get through the AHIP certification and you pass it, you're guaranteed that. You already passed that rate, and it's structured for you to actually learn your stuff. They give you a lot of examples and samples and scenarios and throughout the modules, and then ultimately they test you on that knowledge. And when you get tested and you pass it, you have that certification. It's good for 1 year, and again, you get rechecked again every year. And from your license perspective, every 2 years you do your continuing education. That also maintains. So for consumers, understand that these agents that you're going to meet with are actually really, really scrutinized, overseen, to the best potential from all different angles. Not only from the government, from the agencies. Every health plan also has a structure of a compliance, department, and there is a compliance officer. Sometimes there's more than just a compliance officer. There's teams. There are teams within the compliance department and individuals that specialize in different things. Plans also scrutinize to the degree that they even do some secret shops. They also hire companies that do secret shops and pose as particular consumers, and basically test some of these agents, whether it's on the phone, whether it's on the actually live, in the community. Sometimes they set appointments, sometimes they go to events and monitor, the activities of the sales agents out there that present Medicare products. So it's very, very heavily regulated. I said that before. I will continue saying this, and regulations are important because, again, while this is an industry, these are businesses, and they need to make good money and they need to be profitable. Remember, we said before, they still have to produce the best care for you as a consumer. They have to be the best, and as plans, that is the mission, to actually provide the best care for anybody, that is out there and qualifies for their product. Now, I keep saying the best here. This is not presenting to the consumer, and I'll talk about absolute statements in a minute as a no-no in the field. And when you're presenting to someone, what does that mean, and how you can avoid? You have to avoid those things. So when I say this, that's just the mission. Every plan goes in with the mission that they want to go out there and provide the top care potential, opportunity for these, consumers. And you're watching it right now as a consumer. It's for you. So they present good products. They develop good design product. Now, again, good is a relative, name or word, because really here, every plan has, in their mind, they have the best offering, but they're not really the ones to make that decision. You will make that decision. And no one knows what the others, although there's comparatives and stuff, there are regulations that actually been imposed that we in the industry cannot actually compare ourselves to other plans, even if we know what they have and they don't have. So some of the restrictions, that were, put in place, or regulations that were put in place, they protect you as a consumer and, protect all of us in general to make sure that we do the right thing. But from licensing to testing to making sure that there's oversight, to actually just putting measures in place to avoid any, problems in the long run. So again, they actually have set the parameters for health plans. And everyone has to go through this process. So if you join a plan, as an employee that is going to be facing the actual community and the consumers and the beneficiaries, out there, and you're going to present to them, doesn't matter what form you're going to present to them, as a broker, as an actual field captive agent, as a telesales agent, even as a telesales agent. There's script stuff that are approved. They have to be submitted. They have to follow a certain format. There is rules in the hours, and the CMS does actually also secret shop, these, call hotlines or call centers. They do that for member relations, and they do it for the actual sales call centers. It's important because they need to make sure that everybody is aware. And they test them by asking certain questions. They test them by making sure that they have the right languages to cover the stuff. And all the plans, for example, have to have a language line connected, and they have a certain time to meet to actually be able to discuss that with that consumer in the specific language. So these are tests that they do. And it's important that they test the plans and keep them in check, because again, it's not about the plans. The plans always going to put their measures, and they're going to stay, steadfast on it, and they make sure that it happens. But it's all individuals. At the end of the day, individuals sometimes take it in their own hand to make, sometimes the wrong choice. So the scrutiny is there, and then within the health plans also there are parameters. They have policies and procedures, how to monitor things, how to make sure that these people actually are checked and balanced in terms of telesales or in the field. So do you have the proper policies to make sure that these folks daily out there are being watched and overseen? Whether you have enough supervisory, type of functions out there and individuals that will oversee the activities in the community. If you have any events, do you have the right, documentation and things like that? Do you have all the tools that they're going to need, out there in the community to present to a consumer where they actually meet all the guidelines? So that's the big picture. So again, compliance is key. Rules, regulations have been implemented, and the purpose was to actually prevent some of the chaos that happened before with the lack of guidance in earlier years of Medicare managed care. And as that became more scrutinized and regulated, plans had actually to step up their game and put all the measures in place. And like I said, so it started with the onboarding, the pre-licensing, the licensing, the onboarding, certifications, and RTS, which is ready to sell. Now, it doesn't stop there. Now, you need to have all the components. Again, compliance officers, compliance departments, policies and procedures that actually enumerate all the steps and things like that, whether it's for enrollment process, whether it's for application quality check, whether it's for, and I'm talking just on the sales end. I mean, there's more policies for all the departments within a particular, health plan. But really, those are all the things that need to be in place. And then is there any additional oversight? The more you have these things in place, the more you'll look good in the eyes of CMS, and the more your practice will be better and your consumers will be happy. So that's kind of like, the big, picture. But that takes us back into the field. So someone is finally going through the process, they're ready to sell, they're outside. It is their job to meet the criteria. So for example, you cannot, as an agent, so the first thing is they cannot talk to a consumer without having a certain authorization actually to present to them. Now you can meet someone and talk to them, but before you actually present to them, you have to seek their kind of agreement, and we call that a scope of appointment, not just permission to contact. Permission to contact usually is done if I want to, call you later on, you give me permission to call you. So as a consumer, nobody's just going to solicit from you and call you cold calling, not happening. They're going to make sure that you give them permission, you give us authorization. It's actually all the documentation. Every marketing material has to get approved by CMS. So when we give you a form, it has a code, which is the plan's contract, and that is actually being approved. It has also the year that, the current, so if it's an old document, it may be, not, it'd be outdated. So all those things have happened. And in the CMS shoppers, when they go out, they look for those things. Are the, the collateral materials, current, and so on and so forth? What kind of materials did you have? All that stuff they look for. So again, you as a producer, agents from the health plans, you as a consumer need to understand this. An agent talking to you, wherever you are, they speak to you all the time. That's fine. There's nothing wrong with interacting and hoping that they can present to you their proposition and helping you get the care that you need and the plan that is best fit for you. However, there are rules on how to do this. Like I said, they cannot call you, out of the blue. They cannot walk into your building and just knock on the door. They cannot, slide in a flyer under your door. They cannot entice you with money, bribe you and stuff like that to just enroll in the plan. No. But what they can do, if they interact with you, whatever, they'll have to actually either get permission for you to contact you later, or set up an appointment, which is, in a particular form, and determine, right on the spot what products they're going to discuss with you. They can only discuss one type of, programs with you, and then if they need to talk about a different set of products, they'll have to come back at a later time and discuss it with you. And even if they have an appointment with you personally, one person, and somebody as a spouse is in that house with you, and they're interested, they can present, but they'll have to take another documentation of what we refer to as a scope of appointment, basically highlighting what is that appointment about, what we're going to be discussing specifically. So that's important. And, so there's no solicitation, no cold calling. They have to actually get permission from you. They're going to call you later on. And so there's forms of BRCs or business reply cards, types that they can give you and you can mail in, or they can actually just have permission to contact forms, or they can just have you fill out a scope, which determines which product they're going to discuss with you specifically and when that appointment is going to take place and where. So that's important. And so as an agent, that's a step you have to take. And as the consumer, that's what you have to look for. Now, on the same side, you have to understand is, this doesn't say that I cannot talk to you in general terms. I can engage with anybody, and members or prospects can engage with me, but before we deep dive on any benefit details, we need to go into the actual forms, get the permission. Before you can even start the presentation and discussing things, you need to get that okay, and then they need to understand what they're talking about. And you also have to make sure that there is no obligation. So when you're talking to someone and you sign the documentation of a scope of appointment or just a BRC or a permission to contact, there is no obligation for you to enroll with that plan. That's just giving permission for you, and for you as an agent, it's permission for you to actually, talk to them and present your stuff. At the end of the day, you do not have to enroll anybody, and you as a consumer, you do not have to enroll with a plan. So that's important to understand. And, it is simple. And once you get established and you have the documentation now, which, by the way, that is a document that goes into your file, and with the enrollment application, it has to be dated. You have to get a copy of it. If it's electronic format, you get an email or it gets mailed to you. But the main thing is it's documentation that you have to keep. And it is, also scrutinized and reviewed with CMS. If they do an audit, that's something that they look for. If was this taken, is this missing? Health plans, compliance departments will regulate those, will check those things on a month-to-month basis. Personally, as a practice in my department in the sales division, in enrollment and all the stuff, we've always had checkpoints literally in the process. So when an application gets submitted, daily checks for all submissions, to make sure that the application is accurate, is there, legible, the correct information is there, the scopes are collected, and any other documentation to support is there. Also, there's other documentation that come, and we'll talk about all that process, and how that application gets submitted. So those are the things. So non-solicitation, and unsolicited contact is important. No door-to-door soliciting, and that's one. Now, marketing in general in the field. So whether it's a tabletop, whether it's a community outreach vehicle or an RV, which these are the mobile units that you might find in a corner of a street or at a supermarket or a parking lot. If you do come across people, so there's etiquette and rules on how to engage also. So agent, if you're out there, you cannot make absolute statements. You cannot just say, hey, we got the best plan, and you cannot have a direct question like, what kind of insurance do you have? Do you have Medicare? Do you have Medicaid? Do you have this plan? Do you have that plan? Those are not questions. We cannot ask those questions. Now, you can make a statement of where you are, like just, why you're in the community. So we're here today giving information to the community for people that have this card or this card, whatever, if you point out the RV, or you can have a brochure that you can share with them. And then that's kind of like how you engage. And people usually will come to you like, what is this? And they ask for they ask for information, and you're there. You say, well, before I proceed and present to you, let me actually just get your permission to do the presentation. Here's the form, and they probably say, well, I'm not going to sign anything. That's very typical. And as a consumer, we expect you to do that, and we want you to actually be, aware and wary and very careful. You just don't want to sign your name anywhere. But rest assured, when you're talking to agents, they're very scrutinized. I mean, from their inception, literally as a licensee to the actual work process, and as they're employed, they constantly are being monitored, and they do checks. They're ride-alongs that the management teams mandate, and they have to actually monitor those folks. And sometimes we do even drive-by monitoring through the phone calls and things like that. They can be with you in an appointment. I can dial in literally and say, I just want to be on the phone and listening to your presentation to see if everything's good. And so we do all these things just like we would do it on a phone call if somebody calls into the office. So we can monitor these calls and make sure that there's quality and that nobody is being given the wrong information or have any opportunity of misrepresentation or misleading type of presentations. So that's it. So if you're in the community, there's no approaching people just like that ad hoc in the curb. You have to set up, people have to come to you, and if they engage you, like I said, you cannot ask them a direct question, or you cannot lead with something that is enticing. Hey, did you get your free, $50, gift certificate, and not so much gift certificate, but like we have, some plans have different benefits, and maybe they'll entice you like, hey, did you know you can get 20, round trip, one-way trips and transportation to your medical doctor? Now that's a benefit, but that's also enticing if I started with that. Same thing if they have what we call an over-the-counter, benefit, and whereby you can get a certain allowance a month, and you can go to a pharmacy and pick up toothpaste and things that are covered, and if I come to you and say, as a consumer, hey, did you get you $150 this month, and you'll be like, oh, I can get $150. That would be a no-no. So we cannot do that. So agents, please, and I've, watched, some of these practices, and then we had to reprimand, we had to take action, we had to retrain. That is a no-no. We cannot do that. So if you engage with someone, the key here is they have to actually give you permission. Usually all agents will have an actual presentation kit, a portfolio that they use, and a guide, whether it's electronic format in a tablet or laptop, or it's an actual binder that actually flip through and they go through step-by-step, understanding, pre-qualifying you, going through the whole process, service area, what's Medicare, what's Medicaid, your options, and so on and so forth. And they guide you through the whole thing before they can actually get to a point where they actually can give you the final statement. All right, so that's important. So that's it. So engaging in the community, RV, tabletop, same thing. They have to have all the materials. Now, of course, they just have to have certain basic things, a summary of benefit, so they can share with you what those are. They have to give you some leave behinds, when they, if you conclude and enroll, that's important. And so as a consumer, that when you sign, when you enroll with someone, you actually got all the documentation. At least a copy of your application, a business card, that's important, your summary of benefit. Most of the plans may not give you an actual provider directory, because those things are obsolete the minute they're printed, because doctors change all the time within a network. So you might not get a copy, but they might give you your doctors and make sure they check. That's the other thing. When you're talking to your agent, or as a prospective enrollee, and you as an agent, when you're talking to your customers or prospective customers or members, please make sure you go over the doctors first, and their prescription drugs and anything that's going to impact their health before you even proceed. So some of the best practices that I would recommend is, as you're talking to people and engaging with them and they're giving you the permission to talk to them, well, before I go further, I'd like to actually check, if all your providers are in, your primary, your specialists, and if there are any medications that you actually have to take to see whether they're covered or not in our formulary, and so on and so forth. And of course, if you have multiple products, it's even easier, because you can actually show them a little bit of everything based on what their needs. But the main thing is they have to have their providers, they have to have their drugs covered, and they have to be comfortable with the co-pays and co-insurances. So if you can find those things, then you can proceed with the presentation and then, break it down. And then ultimately, if they're happy throughout the whole process and they say, okay, I'd like to do this, you want to make sure that you recap that, you reiterate and summarize, and ultimately get the actual agreement that they're actually willing to enroll. One of the practices I've had is actually I used to have an actual statement of acknowledgement or statement of understanding recorded at the time of the enrollment. So, and most people welcome the idea because it's for their own protection, and it's also, they can't say that this person did not enroll them, and at the same time, the reps cannot actually, navigate their ways, and the agent may, cut corners at the end. They have to make sure that the person acknowledges the enrollment, same way they would do it on the phone call. And that's important for protection, and it serves as a, documentation that this process was done, and it serves well with CMS when they do audit it. So that's just one practice that I've used, as a design in my, departments. So the idea is, again, you're talking, you're engaging, you're doing it by the book. You don't cross, back and forth with things. You just go straight up, step by step, doing it by the book, and then ultimately, at the end, you also want to check every item. So if you talk to them about their primaries, specialists, so, sir, this is your doctor, this is this, and you understand. Then you also have to talk about their rights, appeals, grievances, and what happens next. You have to tell them about what would be the next step when they enroll into the plan. What would the expectations would be from day one on. If there are benefits that are actually require some sort of steps, whether it's a gym membership or over the counter, and they have to call another transportation, you have to talk about those particular providers, what numbers they have to call, what is the time frame to call, for example, transportation, sometimes 48 hours or more. So you have to tell them these things. So it's educating. So one of the key roles of any agent or producer is identify the client, educate, and enroll. Educate being strong there, because in the central piece, you want to identify. That's what we talked yesterday about prospecting. Identifying, that's great, that's the prospecting and canvassing, but educating is important, because at the end of the day, if a consumer is not educated, ultimately they're not going to be happy. If they are short, changed in the education piece, they might not know everything, therefore the decision is not correct. And that's the other thing. We cannot use tactics where it's aggressive tactics, or scary tactics, so give them, oh my God, you're going to lose your Medicare if you don't sign up. All right, we cannot do those things. That doesn't work. So we cannot throw in things that may, be perceived as like, oh my God, the world is ending if I don't sign up today. So we have to be careful. No pressure tactics, no scare tactics, okay? The individuals, the consumers, and you as a consumer, if you're watching this program, please understand, you have all the rights and you're protected and everyone's looking for your benefit here. Make sure that it's done to your benefit. We will be happy to have you on a plan, any plan, as agents, as health plans, but we want you to be happy. And you agents, you will be successful if you actually do the right thing by every customer and prospective person that you meet. And if you do it right, you will succeed. There is no doubt, okay? You will be one of the best. You will have no disenrollments. We'll talk about disenrollments later and rapid disenrollments and all that stuff. You will actually have all the success that you need in your career path as a producer, and you can actually be much, much better at it, okay? But do the right thing. Remember we said, the more people you help, the more you help yourself, and helping people means you do the right thing by them by presenting it correctly, compliantly. You do not hurt your plan. You do not hurt the consumer. You do not hurt yourself. Because at the end of the day, if you do something wrong as an agent, you will get, summoned, you will get investigated, and if you are, caught in the red, you actually will be terminated. That's not somebody that, that's not something anyone wants, right? And so, and it's not worth it, because just a quick application is worth, the validity. Because remember, that person that you actually sign in and you just put it in the plan is an actual consumer, and an actual person whose care is going to be managed by the plan. And if something is off, they might be affected, in the wrong way, and it can, really, really be, bad for their health. And, God forbid, it can cause them, massive, problems, in their health, or even, that. We do not want that in consumers. Again, buy everywhere, consumers, education is key. This is a platform, again, for everyone, and I try to balance it out between both sides so everybody gets to see, the two sides of the coin. And again, the concept is very simple. Doing by the book, these are the steps that they have to do as agent. This is the steps that you have to do. And again, as consumers, you have plenty of time. You sit down, a good presentation is not going to be 15 minutes. And that's the other thing, agents, producers, please take the time to meet. Don't be worried about the next business. Worry about the one in front of you. You already have somebody in front of you that is, interested. And they are in front of you because they want the business. They want actually to be in the plan. They're eager. They want to learn. You teach them correctly. And as we do the sales pieces, and we'll talk more in details about the sales in the Sales Word series, about what that next step will be. Before you get to that close, what are the steps and how you can make sure that these folks are actually educated properly and ultimately get the best, from your presentation. The more you break it down to them, the more you handle their questions, the more you clarify everything for them, the more they understand what they signed up for, the more they'll be happy when they enroll. And guess what? If they're happy when they enroll, and then the services behind, the scene, once they enroll, happen correctly as you promised, they're happy, they will always remember you, and that's where you generate more, referrals, as we talked about prospecting and generating leads and future business. So it's important. Now, and again, beside the fact that, your license is at stake at any given day as an agent if you don't do the right thing. Because here's the thing, also consumers, you do have a lot of ways to actually, defend yourselves against, any type of, violations of policy and compliance. Whether you have to call CMS, which is not recommended, we always, would like consumers to call the plan. If you have anything, in the plans, we would love to actually listen to your comments. And if you feel that somebody didn't do right by you, and the same way, if somebody did an excellent job, we'd like to hear that too, and get some testimonials and really, recommend these folks and give them commending, plaques and certificates and stuff like that, and recognize their great performance. Same way. But if you feel that somebody did the wrong thing by you, call the plan. We have means to actually investigate and take care of business. And if there is something wrong, we will assist you in any way, shape, or form, as health plans would do. In general, they will make sure that either you get the right satisfaction, or maybe even work with you, to be in another plan. And those are important. Agents also, when you're talking to consumers, and consumers when talking agents, make sure that you cover all your angles. So you talk about your benefits, what do you have, what not, and make sure agents to talk about the lock-ins and the periods when someone can move from a plan to the other. And you can just say, oh yes, that happens. Oh, it's okay, we can move that. So those are important. You have to cover everything. So those presentation kits and binders that you might have, and consumers, the presentation that these agents will have a step-by-step process, and most of that will cover also what the election periods are, when you can be in the plan, when you can move out of the plan, what type of change you can make. Do you go to original Medicare? Do you go to another plan? How many times you can do that? All your special elections will be, explained to you, and a good agent will cover all that with you. And so again, these are tips for you as agents. These are tips for you as consumers, and from both sides. The idea is we need a match from both, and consumers need to be, educated the best so they can be happy and stay in the plans, and the plans will be very pleased with that. The CMS will be happy. Not only that, if customers, you're happy and the plan's happy and CMS happy, that also works in the satisfaction overall, ratings, and then into the star ratings, and then ultimately into the reimbursement ratings for the plan. So everybody wins. And then you as an agent, because the stars are up, the benefits are better. That means you have a better proposition for the consumer. So it's a big circle, and it's all win-win if it's done correctly. And it starts with compliance. So again, this topic today is key, and I'm just covering some of the basic elements of how an agent, interacts with a consumer, and how a consumer should expect, what a consumer should expect from the agents. So everybody moves on to the next stage happy. So now, interacting at the RV and stuff. So also RV marketing has regulations. You need to be there. You need to make sure that, you have documentation, you have all the supplies and all the stuff like that. The setup has to be correct. These are just, cosmetic things, but it's important for your look. The companies will look for those things, that's important. And if you have somebody to walk in and they're interested on the spot to actually meet, that's okay too. But the idea is you want to make sure that you go over the scope of appointment, providers, and so on and so forth. Make sure that they're happy, and then you break it down. You do a summary, you do your checklist, you go over stuff, make sure there's a statement of understanding, they understand what they're enrolling for, when they're going to be effective. All those things are important steps. Once you get that and you have the enrollment, you close that, you make sure you document everything, make sure you follow up with your members. A couple of days later, how's everything good? The application went through. Good practices, and good customer service. And again, those are steps that will go a long way beyond just the enrollment. And once that person is in, they'll follow through. And as we talk to under the MCO world, we'll talk about the next steps where a consumer is moved from the enrollment portion into the post-enrollment, and then what happens to their cycle and what happens to their care and where the information goes, how it processes, and so on and so forth. So again, now that's marketing, whether in a tabletop or in the actual RV. Now, events marketing. Events marketing is hotly scrutinized since the new regulations of MIPA. And those regulations are very simple. So CMS has definitions on, types of events. So there's formal, informal, and there's educational events. So formal, informal is really events that actually salesy, but at the end of the day, the difference is the formal is as it stands. Formal, so there's a presentation, there's a skit, there's an actual bullet structure. I present to you as a group. I got to meet all the different items and bullets, in that presentation, and then ultimately, I have to introduce the plan myself, do the whole thing, the service area, break it down to the benefits. If I talk about Part B, Part D, all the different parts of Medicare, what their supplemental benefits are, the different, co-pays, co-insurances, grievance and appeals, go through the whole thing. And that's a very long and very methodical and very specific and step-by-step type of, presentation. That's formal. And usually that's defined as something that is presented or promoted as a sales event and is in the formal aspect. So seminars usually fall in that category, and those are the ones where someone stands in front of an audience and presents, and that audience can be one person, by the way. So if an event, one person shows up, you still have to present to them in the same, because the event has been promoted as such. And so you do that, and then later on you can sit down with them at the kitchen table and do the presentation one-on-one and go beyond, that, because now it's personalized. Because again, when you do a formal, group stuff, you just do general stuff. It's not talking about individual needs, because, again, we need to talk, with privacy, with these individuals and their personal needs on the side, in a place that is confidential, where there's nobody else, eavesdropping on them, right? So that's important. So now we get to that. Now the other piece of sales events is informal, and that could be anything. So RVs, tabletops are informal types. Some events can be also informal, whether it's in festival, whether it's a senior center, but it's just a tabletop type. Those are things. There were also rules that actually affect the formal or informal, which is around food, for example. So health plans cannot sponsor food. A lot of people think that back in the days that was big. I mean, health plans sponsored lunches and dinners and stuff. People came came in. People come for food, breakfast. That's great. So CMS kind of cut down a little bit that, so not to put incentives, out there just for people to come in for food, and just also, for plans to take advantage of those, cases. And again, I'm not, putting a negative on one or the other. It's more just sharing what the historic and what was the rationale of putting these restrictions. And it was not done maliciously, but it was just a practice of marketing. I invite you to a nice little meal, and I get an interest. People come in, right? So, but now there are restriction rules, and it's not that you cannot. So there's refreshments or beverages. There are things that may not add up to a food or a meal, like snacks, cookies, and things like that. And that's already defined by CMS, so helplines know these regs, and when they do sponsor something, that has to refresh snacks and things like that, it's okay. If there is an opportunity where there's a meal, sponsored, by helpline, that's okay, except that the meal and the event are two separate things. A plan can have an actual luncheon for a bunch of people, and then, but no sales, marketing, presentation can happen there. No marketing materials can be on a table. Now, once that, hour, is gone, and then maybe the second hour, it's an actual event on the side, that's something different. Two separate events, basically. One has nothing to do with the other. Same thing if there's a medical, screenings going on, you cannot mingle with sales, so sales cannot be there, and those are some of the restrictions. Now, there's educational events. Now, let me just define this very simply. An educational event is where there's education, whether it's about diabetes, nutrition, whatever the topic may be. Blood pressure, cholesterol, a doctor, a dentist, somebody's talking, a nurse is doing blood pressure screens, all that. And so if it's promoted as educational event, no sales, period. If a sales event happens, you can have an educational component. So I promote a sales event, formal or informal, and I invite a doctor to actually do a little pitch about diabetes. That's okay. It's permitted. So you can have an educational component in a sales event, but you cannot have a sales event in an educational event. Simple. All right? Maybe not that simple, but that's kind of like the gist of it. But so understanding that is a good balance. So helplines have mastered this art, and they know how to work it. The community, for the most part, knows these things. Senior centers know these things, and they work. Also, helplines, when you do, and producers and events coordinators, when you set up events at senior centers, there are guidelines also from the cities, the local municipalities, and, even some of the Department of the Agents, depending on what state and what city you are. And so sometimes there are limitations on what you can do and what you cannot do in a facility. Some places they may not want you to actually do enrollments on the spot. You need to do appointments later on, and set up, follow up with those particular prospects that are interested. So these are just things to keep in mind and just to keep focused on. So again, we covered, RV tabletop, the do's, and the don'ts in the community and the curb stuff. At events, the difference between formal, informal, and educational, and what to avoid. That's important. Then the next thing is, beyond events, now you go to, healthcare settings. There are restrictions when you market at providers. Now, as we talked on the prospecting and canvassing, agents usually are going to try to find, consumers. And consumers, you want that because you want to be exposed to information that is valuable to you. And so they'll probably interact with you. And for the most part, you'll find agents all over the place. And one of the places that used to be a big, place to, where, we congregated as agents or congregate to even today is provider settings. So when you're in a hospital, in a clinic, whatever the case. So of course, not an emergency room, but let's say you're in a primary care setting, there is a provider, and, we used to be in those settings. If you're in outpatient clinic and primary care clinic, a part of a hospital, sometimes you have people, tables in areas where, or at least they used to have those things. So the regulations that took place, and restrictions are allowing some of that to happen, but in a very guided way. So we cannot do you cannot encounter, and meet with an agent anywhere in an exam room, for example, in a consultation room, or in a waiting area. So those are 3 no-nos in a healthcare setting. We cannot be there. Agents, we make sure that we're not there. We in the management team, we will make sure that it's not happening. We cannot allow that to happen. We train people not to be there. We cannot interact with anybody. So places that are permissible, for example, could be a cafeteria, could be a meeting room. So when we work with providers, we try to identify spaces that are eligible or at least, allowable under the guidance and the guidelines to actually where we can market. And then we make sure that we have the right arrangements to do that. And that's okay. So again, it's know what you can do versus what you can do, and you as a consumer know where you can be approached versus where you cannot be approached. So if someone approaches you in the wrong place, you can say no. And it's educational to both sides. And if we both do our job, technically we won't have a problem, because you as a consumer will never have to worry about it, because the agents will do it right and they will always interact with you properly. Now, they can have a tabletop outside the actual office if they have permission, and as you walk in or out, they can interact with you. The providers also cannot steer to any particular plan, but if you happen to be in a lot of providers, they will give a rotation schedule to different plans to be in the facilities, and so therefore everybody has an opportunity to talk to different folks as they come to the stuff. And sometimes they will give an opportunity to have multiples in one place. Sometimes they'll bring in a broker that has all the actual health plans in the area. So depending on the setting, in the setup, you will be able to actually interact with more than just one and get all the information that you need as a consumer. And agents, you will be able to interact with many people providing that. And the providers are not going to do anything. They're not going to be signing up for you. They cannot take applications. They cannot do anything. Now, if someone is interested at a facility and they say, I'd like to talk to Mr. John from Plan X, and can you please have them call? So the provider may call you, and then you basically can get, you maybe do a three-way call, or depends on your setup in the company, you can do a follow-up and do an actual walk-up, to them, and do a scope of appointment on the spot when you visit them, at the home. So again, back in the days, we even had to wait 48 hours before you walk into somebody's home. So you have to meet them, get the scope of appointment, wait 48 hours, and then go meet with them. Now you can do walk in and do the scope while you're there, but before you present. So again, if someone has a referral piece like that, they can do it, but they have to do it correctly without steering. And it's based on the actual client or patient's request and not them saying. Now, again, some providers will recommend a plan versus the other depending on, a lot of factors, and that's a fine line between steering and not steering depending on the circumstances. If, let's say, a benefit may not be covered by a plan and now you need that benefit, the providers are usually educated and they might just tell them, well, this plan, has the benefit, maybe you should consider this. And it's more of a consideration of the patient, but it's not really steering, that. And again, with providers, it's also a fine line, and they are also, strict and guidelines for them. They cannot just blanket, send people to one plan because they pay a bit more or not. That shouldn't be the case. It's more about the merits and whether that patient is going to benefit or not. So it revolves around you, the consumer, and that's important to understand and remember. And then, so that's kind of like in the healthcare setting. Another piece of healthcare is pharmacies. So again, you probably also encounter agents at pharmacies, and we can be, and agents can be deployed or assigned to pharmacies in pharmacy marketing. That's because, again, most of these plans have prescription drugs coverage and over-the-counter coverage, things like that, supplemental benefits. So they work with these pharmacies, and hopefully help people get, the drugs and the prescriptions that they need, and even the over-the-counter items. And if you work with a pharmacy as an agent, there are restrictions as well. So some of the guidance there is very simple. You cannot be anywhere by a countertop where the actual patient is talking and having a consultation with the pharmacist. You got to be somewhere else that is maybe, where the cashiers are, somewhere that is out of the way, out of the path, and you cannot be listening to personal information and health, PHI type of stuff. So we cannot do that. So again, those are very simple rules to observe and guidelines. It sounds like a lot. I try to summarize as much as I could within, this time frame. I'm not even sure how much time we spend right now. But the idea is, these are very simple rules and regulations. And so if you're a producer, or an agent, and you heard this, these are things that you've probably been trained on. It's a good refresher, and you can use this video as a quick, pocket training if you want it. But at the same time, for you as a consumer, it's a good thing to see and understand the other way and how things are being, designed for your own protection. So win-win for all. Everybody's happy, and everybody does it exactly correctly. The plans are happy, the compliance program is successful, CMS is happy, the satisfaction is good. Everybody at the end of the day is really, having a great time, and that's important. So again, now telesales. Some of the guidance in telesales, you have to have scripts, you have to follow scripts. Now the scripts are not verbatim, they are, you step by step, but it's conversational, so you can actually pose and talk, but you have to always cover everything that's on the script. And all the scripts are recorded. So for consumers, whenever you call a plan, that's important to understand that it's recorded for quality assurance, and it will be actually scrutinized, revisited. Random calls get checked. Sometimes you get auditors on the phone. You get management, personnel that is actually listening in the call. Sometimes they'll announce themselves. Sometimes they do it after the fact and listen to the call once the call is over to make sure that there's nothing missing. And compliance, departments will probably random pick some of these, calls and scrutinize as well. CMS will make some calls as well and listen into to these particular calls, ask the right questions, and they ask about different things and different benefits to make sure that the knowledge of these agents on the phone is where it needs to be. And that's all, for your own protection as a consumer, but also for the protection of the plan, the agents, and everybody. So it is important, that we stay compliant. It isn't, for everybody's benefit, whether it's the health plan. Obviously CMS wants to make sure that everything is done, in the best, top, compliant way. You consumers, you want to make sure that you're not getting the wrong, information or misrepresented and misled, things like that. And just to give a quick summary, not summary, but just an added value, there are severe ramifications to agents if they don't, apply. There are, severe ramifications for plans if they don't comply, and it's important that everybody, does their piece so it doesn't go to that point. And consumers, as I said, you have the ability to talk to the plan. You can certainly call CMS, and file a complaint if you feel that you've been misrepresented or misled. But certainly if you call the plan, good or bad, plans would be more than happy, more good than bad, of course. Hopefully there's no bad. But if there is an experience one way or the other that you're not sure about, and you call, and people do that all the time, sometimes you get, but also beware. I want to just make this note. This is an insurance product type, of environment. And again, there are salespeople that are, although we have different titles for them, and they are not supposed to be salesy, although we train them in the sales, techniques, but they're really here to help you as benefit advisors. But be aware that sometimes there's competition, and agents may actually, say, okay, well, no, it's the same thing. You can sign with me. It's the same thing. I know John from the other plan, or I know John. We do the same thing. Now, you might be, taking that and perceiving it as like, oh, we work together. We don't. Sometimes it's two different plans, and you might move from one plan to the other. You need to know the rules of how you apply. Sometimes if you are a dual, that you have Medicare and Medicaid, you have to be careful as well. Because, again, if you have a long-term care type of product, like where you have, you qualify for long-term care, Medicare and Medicaid, combined. You might have plans that have one piece of the product coverage, which is, for example, you have the MLTC or the long-term care in one plan, and the MA, which is the Medicare in another plan. And some plans will say, no, it's the same thing. You can move here. Always ask first before you make a decision. Don't make an uninformed decision. Always call your agent of record, the one that enrolled you. And of course, they have to be the right agent. They would have done the right thing by you already. And that's why I recommend to producers and agents, do the right thing by your members, by your prospects. And if you enroll them in the plan and they're happy, they'll always be. And my training is very simple. You have any questions, call me. I'm here for you. Don't make any decision until you contact me. And good producers, good agents will have that relationship with their customers, and they will go the extra mile for them. Most of the good agents, the top agents, they actually great customer service representatives as well. And we are the front line and the first line of defense, against anything in the field. So in sales, in the marketing, in the field, agents, broker, captives, or even on the phone, you're the first line of defense. You do the right thing. That's customer service one-on-one. You're interacting, but also you have the ability to impact them positive or negative. So key here, focus on positive, do the right thing, do the right thing, do the right thing, compliantly, ethically, all the times, and never do anything else to jeopardize your license, your job, your family's livelihood, your company, your team, and also, obviously the ultimate, person that you cannot affect is your consumer. So that's important to actually focus on. And then ultimately, everybody's happy. And, so for today, I think that's plenty of information, that's covering the regulations, the marketing guidelines, and just a quick understanding of the basics, where you're probably going to interact the most as a consumer or an agent, producer out there. Doesn't matter what your status is, follow those rules, do the right thing, and go through the process correctly. And then when we do the training, the sessions that have to do with the sales components, the sales steps, we'll touch base more into how to do all that stuff and still maintain compliance. And so once you get through all these sessions, if you actually follow these sessions and you exactly follow what I'm telling you, you'll be just good. If you're a producer and consumers, if the agents you meet follow these guidelines, you will be very pleased and happy with their performance and happy with what they're going to give you as and what plans they can enroll you with. Now, some agents, just to summarize, to close, some agents may be only selling one product, and again, that product may be good for you or not for you. So the idea is they have to ask you the right questions. You need to give them what you need from a plan, and of course, providers important. Your drugs, if you're taking a prescription, that's important. And please don't hold back, because sometimes we've seen this happen. A member may forget, or they may not tell you about all the specialists, and this is not, we don't have, medical underwriting in the Medicare. We're not gonna, scrutinize, and waive someone versus the other and pick one versus the other. You qualify, and the qualifiers are easy. You have Medicare Part A, Part B. You live in the actual service area. You don't have end-stage renal disease, which is technically, and that's this year, which is basically anybody that's going through dialysis or had some sort of a kidney transplant. So those are some of the things. If you qualify, you qualify. Period and out. So agents cannot discriminate or cherry pick here. So the idea is very simple. If you have information that is pertaining to your health and it's going to impact you, the more you tell the agent, the more they'll be able to help you. Agents, the more you ask about those things, the more you actually get the right tools to help you give them the best package and the best product for them. If they have, everybody is clear on the expectations and need, you can devise, the right product for them. You can show them the best, choices, and they have to make that final selection. The consumer will do that. You don't make that for them. Big mistake in sales. People try to sell what they think is good. No, I don't sell what I think is good for you. I sell what's good for you. You tell me what you need. I'll match those things with you. You get that particular product and you're actually good to go. Simple. That's it. So everybody's happy. We want you to be happy as a consumer. We want all the agents out there to be, compliant, professional, courteous, and give the best, customer satisfaction, upfront, before you even become an actual member or client of any particular plan. That being said, Hurricane H here, iHealth Radio and the iHealth channel. This was Regulate and Legislate, and today we talked about marketing guidelines for Medicare. Thank you very much. Have a great night, and we'll talk soon at the next show. Thank you. Bye now.